I called one of my girlfriends and I said, I'm not coming. She said, within a few minutes, another one of the girlfriends called and said, well, you have to come. She said, no, I just don't feel like rushing. And the girlfriend pushed it and said, well, is everything all right? Is something wrong? She said, just don't want to rush. That's an astonishing amount of trusting. I told her, we don't rush on the new planet. So she didn't. As opposed to coming up with 100 reasons, because we all can. Well, I have to be there. They expect me. We have it every Wednesday. I'm supposed to bring the broccoli, whatever. No, she just said, I'm not going to rush. I'm not going to give up this new peaceful way of living. So instead of rushing, she was calmly and quietly doing things around the house. And her adult son came to talk to her, precisely because she had missed the lunch thing. She would have missed this conversation. And he started talking to her about, he's a younger adult, but he started talking about his favorite subject, which is video games. In the past, she said she would have deflected, criticized, multitasked, written on her computer, answered emails, texted her friends, changed the subject, all of that, because why would she want to listen to a discussion about video games? But she said, I remembered what you said, that it's not the subject. In other words, that's not the subject material he's bringing up. The subject of the conversation is him. So she just listened to him talk about video games. Didn't do any of those other things. No criticism, no changing the subject, nothing. And he moved from the kitchen, where he started to talk to her, to a chair closer to her, and then sat on the couch next to her. Then she put her arm around him, and he talked to her for 2 hours. And she listened to him talk about video games. The last thing on earth she could have imagined doing before. She said by the end, he was just beaming. And ended with, thanks, Mom. With a tone of voice that she hasn't heard in a very long time. Like a decade. So later in the day, she went out for coffee with her husband. In the past, she said, I would have taken that whole drama with my father and brother and drugs and prison and jail and bail hearings. I would have dumped the whole thing on his head, and he would have just felt burdened. She didn't even mention any of it. So what did he do? He talked about what everybody's favorite subject is. He talked about himself and work and stuff. And she just listened. And he finally sat there looking across this, one of those little itty bitty tables you sit at a restaurant or an outdoor cafe or wherever they were. And he said, kind of wary, like, you just see him just kind of scrunching one eye. He said, you seem different. She just kept listening to him. Finally, he stopped again and he said, you seem content. She said, I just enjoy being with you. After a few more minutes, he said, you look unusually pretty today. She said she could tell that he didn't know what to say, having her listen to him for this long. He finally even said, do you want to talk about that real love stuff that you're learning? And she said, no. Now, that's brilliant. Most people would have been just sitting in wait, like a predatory animal waiting for their husband to say, do you want to talk about that real love stuff? Yes, I really do. And then gone in for the kill. She said, no, just like talking to you. So he kept talking to her. Then he wanted to talk about their older son, who's addicted to pot and is home for the holidays and, just reeks of smoke and comes home in the middle of the night and behaves, well, like you would expect him to behave. And he said, I think we need to talk to him. We need to know when he's coming home. And she just said, we can, if you'd like, but I'm satisfied that he'll be okay. He's an adult. The drama was over. They had a beautiful conversation, a moment of genuine intimacy, held hands. She said, I have to pinch myself. I just can't believe it. This is a man who in the past wouldn't have known intimacy if it was written on the side of a moving van and ran him over. She's just thrilled. And that's how powerful and quick the effects of real love can be. I was talking to a guy on a call, new subject, and he said to me, I have a pattern of behavior that I have when I feel threatened. He said, first, I try to be right. And I'm thinking, wow, that's one of the last things people admit. And he said, if that doesn't work, then I act like a victim trying to get people to sympathize with me. And I'm thinking I'm perhaps in a video game. Then he said, and if that doesn't work, I just get nasty and vindictive. I didn't say a word of this to him. He came up with all of this himself. This is an example of telling the truth. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't ashamed. He just wanted me to know who he was. And at the end of our conversation, he said, I feel closer. Yeah, we do when we tell the truth about ourselves. It's a beautiful thing. It's something that not many people can do. We just automatically react by defending ourselves and trying to look good. A couple came here for an intervention recently. And after the intervention, I wrote to them, and not really sure what lesson I'm trying to teach with this, but at the time, after I had written to them, I thought, you need to hear this. So you figure out why I needed to say this. I said, you two, it was a couple, you two need to know how beautifully you trusted and learned while you were here. Keep remembering how you felt while you were here. You both had moments, many moments, where you felt, because I was there, I watched you, you felt no fear, and they both arrived terrified, just quivering with fear. I said, you felt peaceful and happy. Now, why does that matter? Because it proves that you can do it. You wondered if your lives could ever change from the horrible condition that your individual lives and marriage were in. And this proves that you can do it, because I saw you where you felt no fear. That's very cool, because now when you're tempted to be afraid, or to snap at a child, or to snap at each other, or to use some addictive behavior, you can remember that any of those behaviors simply makes it impossible to enjoy the peace and genuine joy that you experienced individually and together while you were here. That is why we don't want to make unloving or addictive choices. Not because of a commandment, not because God said so, not because somebody told you you shouldn't, not because your addiction counselor said you shouldn't, not because of guilt or shame, but because we don't want anything to interfere with the profound happiness that is available to us. Happiness that you two have now felt. Now, back to those of you who are listening. When people are simply told to stop an addictive behavior, drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, whatever, they're then, if they stop, simply left with their untreated pain, which is unbearable. We have to find something better than simply treating our pain. And that is why people often, well, almost always, need groups, coaches, interventions, everything that they can get their hands on. It lets them trust enough to feel a condition, genuine happiness, that is better than the pain they've always known, or even the condition of less pain that comes when they use some addictive behavior. Less pain is not happiness any more than not stepping actively on a mine in a minefield is happiness. There's no joy in a minefield. New subject. Lady who hadn't worked for years. She learned about real love, hadn't worked for a living for years. Learned about real love, gained confidence that she was not just worthless, then got a job. She doubted herself often, but gradually she doubted herself less and less on the job and in her life. She's learned one lesson after another, and now she's a valued member of her team at work. She wrote me and she said, "It excites me so much to know that hard work pays off." Like I used to tell my kids when I'd say, "Why do we work?" And admittedly with some sarcasm, they said, "Because work makes us happy and strong." It really does. She said, "It excites me to know that hard work pays off because now I really want to work. I want to work not just at work, but I want to work in other areas. I'm actually enjoying my job, whereas it used to terrify me before." The problem is, I sometimes get confused. I wonder if I'm only working for imitation love. If you have to work for what you're getting out of your job, then it might be a form of imitation love, whereas real love is freely given. It's kind of unavoidable to work for, like, money. And it's harder to find unconditional love at work. But just because you work for money doesn't mean you're working for imitation love. Not all money is imitation love, just like not all sex, not all praise, not all the things that we list as imitation love need be. In this case, you're just working for a way to support yourself. That doesn't necessarily make it a form of imitation love. And then you continue, or she continues, and it feels good, but then sometimes I'm disappointed in the end, and I don't want that feeling again of I worked so hard for some stupid feeling. With real love, which you have, you already have everything you want. Your whole life is different. It's a miraculous thing to see. Now, when you work hard for something on the job, it can be just a feeling of satisfaction and confidence on top of genuine happiness instead of praise or power, which is what you used to work for before. There's nothing wrong for getting a feeling of satisfaction from doing a good job at work. In fact, that's commendable. Or having an increased sense of confidence. And it's not addictive. You continue. I enjoy that I feel loved and feel loving. That's very real. It's good. On top of that, I enjoy the fulfillment of helping other people feel loved. But I don't have to have it. She said, I know that feeling. For example, I enjoy working in my backyard, but because I already feel unconditionally loved, it's just an additional sense of fulfillment in doing something fun, something beautiful. Once we have a foundation of feeling loved, there are lots of things that we can do just for kicks, fun, satisfaction, enjoyment. You continue. Lots of people work hard for material things or fame, and the problem is I do get a certain amount of satisfaction from that. Okay, I'm not worried about it. As long as you have a foundation of love and happiness, you'll sort out why you work for everything else. You really will. And the fact that you're looking at it means that it won't bite you from behind. To conclude, I like being around people who work hard to make things better. I'm actually bored to be around people who don't. I want that to be my life. Working hard to make things better. Those are words you would never have said a year ago. So, good for you. It's nice to work from a foundation of feeling loved. Here's somebody who says, tell me about real love and phobias. I have a phobia of vomit. Actually, almost everybody's disgusted by vomit, but not very many people have a phobia of it. If my kids throw up, for example, I gag, I become a hypochondriac. Worse, I can't be in the room. If everybody in the family is sick, then I'm up all night worried. And it's not them I'm worried about. It's me. So how much of a phobia will go away as a natural byproduct of real love? How much of it is dependent on my facing it and reconditioning myself? I've been reading up on exposure therapy, so that's why I'm curious. Exposure therapy can work sometimes. I can just imagine the exposure therapy for a phobia for vomit. I'm not sure how you would do that. Those of you who don't know, exposure therapy simply means being gradually and increasingly exposed to the thing that you're afraid of. So I don't know if you go around requesting that people vomit into a bag and become exposed to that more and more. Exposure therapy can work, but I've just discovered that it's not necessary. I've worked with people with lots of phobias, and I've discovered that the more we focus on a fear, the more afraid we tend to get. So I know a lady who had a phobia of spiders, terrified, would scream, would stand on a chair, like spiders couldn't climb up the legs of a chair. She just became incoherent. The more unconditionally loved she felt, the less she cared. In fact, she couldn't even sleep at night because she could picture the spiders climbing up the four posts of her bed. She had the four posts of her bed in large cans that had some sort of poison tinctured oil in them so that no spiders from the floor could climb up her bedposts. Of course, the spiders that descend from the ceiling, those wouldn't be helping those much, and that's why she couldn't sleep at night. The more loved she felt, the more her phobia decreased until it was gone. A lady who was terrified of rodents called me one day and said, guess what I'm holding? How would I know? A rat. A rat that I went with my daughter down to the pet store and helped her buy. And I hold the rat, and the rat climbs up my arm, across my shoulder to the other hand. Why? We never discussed her rat phobia at all. She just became less and less afraid of everything. All pain and all fears are additive. So if you're already in pain emotionally about everything and you're fearful all the time, then you're more likely to become afraid by specific things. If you get rid of the base fear, which is 99% of the problem, most phobias disappear. People have flown here to have interventions, for example, or retreats or whatever. People who were terrified of flying and said, I slept all the way here. People who've had phobias of sickness and closed spaces, and it just goes on and on. It's all additive. Now, this lady continues. It's weird, but since starting Real Love, I feel like I've seen my phobias I've seen my phobia both intensify and lessen in intensity. What I mean by lessen is that after the initial fight or flight response, I can remember that I'm loved, meditate, call somebody, remember that I will survive, that it will pass, and so on. And though I will still feel some fear, I will calm down immensely. Strong indication that you're feeling loved. You continue though. What I mean by it intensifying is that I almost feel like in my real love journey, I've been unearthing so much stuff, like fears, behaviors, childhood memories. I feel like I've also kind of unearthed some phobias. and that it's kind of awakened. I feel like I'm triggered more frequently, easily, and that I'm facing phobias more. Is this because I'm unearthing all kinds of fears, or am I just more ready to face them? It all makes perfect sense. The more loved you feel, the safer you feel, but also the safer you feel to be afraid. So some fears that you've shoved down and suppressed to the point where you don't even remember them, as you're feeling safer, they're coming up. And you'll deal with those just like you did the ones that were obvious in the first place. So instead of stuffing it, feel the fear and the pain. The best healing in the world occurs while you're being loved, while you're feeling the fear and the pain, instead of just stuffing it or responding to it. So, bless your heart. Way to go. Here's somebody who writes and says, I'm a bit confused about how to talk to people from my, who I knew in my life pre-real love. Like over Christmas, I'm going to be visiting some friends who will have what I'll call some elephants in the room. Like they have problems with their kids, divorces, and all the usual kind of stuff that people have at gatherings. And I feel like I have to just switch off part of me because it feels unloving to talk to somebody outside of real love who is needing help, but who isn't willing to trust or even hear what you say. What could I be doing? You're afraid to come across as a, crazy, raving zealot, teaching people real love who don't really want to hear it, even though they're talking about their pain. People are constantly talking about themselves. In fact, they almost never shut up about themselves. People are telling you about their marriages, their kids, their jobs, their clothing, their hair, their all the time. So the opportunities to talk about real love are everywhere. Gradually, you'll learn how to take advantage of them, but you're never obligated to. Examples. So a friend says to you, my husband can be just so difficult to talk to. This is a very popular thing for people to say about partners. Oh, I just have so, or they'll mention their partner and just roll their eyes. What could you say that wouldn't be intrusive, but would still be giving them an opportunity to ask you something if they wanted to? You could say, I know a lot of people like that. Usually people who are difficult to talk to were not listened to as kids. So they don't know how to listen now as adults. They don't know how to care enough to listen. If the person that you're talking to really wants to learn more, they'll say, where'd you learn that? If they don't want to learn more, they're going to continue to complain about their husband. It's that easy to figure out whether people want to learn something. But at least you expose them to an opportunity to learn. Or you might say, you may discover that you don't listen to him as well as you thought. You have to say that lightly, lightheartedly. Maybe you're not as good a listener as you thought either. You'd have to know somebody pretty well to do that and say it with a smile on your face and mean it. But it would be yet another opportunity for somebody to ask you more questions if they felt like it. Or another example, somebody says, my boss can be so controlling. You could say, well, lots of people are. And they almost always do that for a feeling of power. They're always trying to compensate for pain and fears that they have. Because power beats feeling helpless and afraid. They're almost never happy. If somebody wants to know more about that, they're going to be fascinated that you just described their boss to a T. Because they'll jump in with things like, how did you know he's afraid of almost everything? That his marriage is terrible and that his kid's in jail and the other one's using drugs and his daughter's pregnant by who knows who. And all you do is describe why people behave as they behave. It gives people an opportunity to talk about their lives or not, to listen to the principles you have to teach or not. But you're never obligated to teach them or to change their lives. You continue. Some friends that will visit over Christmas will have elephants in the room. And right now, I just feel like switching off part of me. We talked about that. That was the introduction to the last email. This was a second email. We did go to some friends for dinner. They moved the conversation onto real love, and she blames her partner's past for many problems, and she's quite controlling, which I explained is why he shuts down sometimes, which only adds to her frustration. I explained to her that her controlling leads to him shutting down. She was quite offended, despite the fact that she asked me what she could do differently with her husband. I said it as lovingly as I could, and now she's distantly polite with me, but avoids conversation with me in case it comes up again. She has now sent him off, her husband, for counseling so that he'll get fixed. And she's a Bible-thumping Christian and hides behind her words of faith. You did exactly the right thing. You were asked what she could possibly do or how she could understand it better. And then she was miserable when she asked. So what did you have to lose? Nothing. And it turns out she didn't want to hear what you had to say. Pretty obvious she's really not interested in growing. So if you lose such a person as a friend, what's the loss? I once had a family member come up to me and describe a problem in their family that was pretty serious, and asked me what I thought, because I travel all around the world talking to people about problems exactly like this. And I explained why they were having this problem in their family. And the family member said, "Oh, well, I just called to see how you were doing. Thanks for talking." Hung up the phone and dropped the subject forever. So if I'm asked, and if it's appropriate, and if I'm not pushing, I'll give somebody an opportunity to hear principles that could change their lives. But if they make it pretty clear, and they will, within the first minute of your talking about these things, that they don't want to hear it, then I'm done. Here's a 30-year-old woman who writes, "I heard my parents talking behind my back. They were saying that they decided that they would approve of my new job and that I had joined a new church." And then she says in all caps, "And it makes me so angry, like they think they own me." Now, listen slowly, carefully. This is the best that they know how to show you that they love you. Really. They do kind of think they have a right to have an opinion about your choices. And they may well have chosen to not support the changes in your life, but they did. That approval is all they have to give. Really. They don't know how to teach you. All they know how to do is approve or disapprove. They're not trying to own you. They're not doing something to you. Now, admittedly, they don't understand you or really care about you in ways that you've been accustomed to lately in real love, but they're trying. So relax. They're not intentionally offending you. Right now, you're the one who's being too critical of them. They're supporting you the best that they know how. So lighten up. You continue. "It's like they're stewards of my bleep happiness. I just want them out of my life. My distrust of them is more than anyone in the entire world. My distrust is more than I'd ever have of somebody who is a stranger on the street. I feel like they're reaching in to control me. You're just reacting to past pains. And it's natural that you would feel this way, because when you were a kid, they did control you. And sometimes they still try to. But you're not a kid anymore. You're different. The healthy way to see this would be if you said something like this to yourself. My parents have no clue who I am or what I do. None. They never did. They didn't prepare me to be happy. In fact, they nearly destroyed me, but they did that only because they didn't know any better. And all that matters is that I'm happy now. And now my parents are trying to be supportive, even though they still don't have a clue who I am or how I got happy despite them. They simply don't know better. And I refuse to be angry about the past. I choose to be as loving as I can be. This is important. If you let them steal your happiness, that would be really foolish. You continue. Now, mind you, I'm just answering her email paragraph by paragraph. She's not responding to what I'm saying. She said, I will do anything to get away from them, to get them out, so they have no part in my life. And most of this is capitalized. I can't stand them talking behind my back. It's like they feel like they're superior to me. It's like they're my enemy. So write down what I suggested you say to yourself. Read it again. You're right that they don't understand how you got to your present happiness, nor did they help you. But they didn't have the help that you have had. Pay attention. You've gotten lots of help in learning to be happy. They didn't have that. They had nobody to unconditionally love them, which you have. Let me repeat, they didn't know better, nor were they loved. So, no, they're not the enemy. They're just ignorant. They're just unloved. They just didn't know any better. And they're not talking about you behind your back. They're just talking and being themselves. They might even be congratulating themselves on your increasing happiness. Oh, and taking credit for it. Who cares? If you hadn't found unconditional love, you would have ended up doing most of the same things to your kids that they did. So lighten up and cut them a break. Really. Here's somebody who writes, some part of me is horrified by how much I was controlled in my marriage, while not seeing what fear controls me now. So you're paying attention. Lots of people blame a spouse or a thing, when the real problem is fear that preceded even meeting the spouse or the thing. You continue. I honestly feel that if I learned more, other than just seeing my husband's controlling, then I wouldn't have a choice. Now, when I read that, I did not understand that. I gotta say, if I learned more, instead of just blaming my husband's controlling, then I wouldn't have a choice. So I wrote to her and I said, I don't understand that sentence. So what does she mean? It doesn't seem to make sense that if you learn more, you wouldn't have a choice, right? So back to her. You were afraid. Once I learned what she meant by that, I could answer it. You were afraid to learn too much more about yourself, because then you'd feel like you had to do the right things. You'd have to be responsible. You'd have to stop blaming. You'd have to make your own decisions, that kind of thing. That keeps a lot of people from learning more. It turns out that a lot of people enjoy their misery. They enjoy their victimhood, because then they're not responsible for doing anything. They can blame everybody else. So you're afraid that if you learn more, you'll be trapped by knowledge into doing the right thing. Yeah, I kind of get that. It's a common belief, but the opposite is true. The less you know, the less choice you have. When you're ignorant of love and things get difficult, love exists theoretically, kind of, as a choice, but you can't see it. So it doesn't really exist for you, does it? No, because it's hidden. It's there, but it's kind of like saying dark matter exists, or muons, or quarks, or whatever. They're there, but they don't really practically exist for me because I don't know how to use them. Same with love for you. Once you learn about real love, once you feel it, then you can really choose. You can choose love, but you don't have to. You're not trapped. You can still choose not to be loving. More knowledge doesn't keep you from behaving stupidly, as a great many of us have proven. Knowledge and feelings expand your choices. They don't make you do anything. You still have the freedom to choose. What you are afraid of is that once you know the truth and learn to be loving, if then you don't choose love, you'll look extra stupid. And that is true. You would be extra stupid. When we know the truth and when we feel loved, it is kind of dumb to choose unloving. But we still have the choice. The more we know, the more we practice loving, the more choices are available to us. It's a beautifully expanding process. It doesn't narrow your choices at all. A woman wrote and said, "This week I lost my temper with my roommate. I yelled at her, stating what I was upset about, and when she smiled at me in a mocking way, one of those, quote, 'I am the peace of the universe and you are a peasant,' end quote, ways, I lost it, dropped the F-bomb, slammed doors, screamed. Now we were off and running. Needless to say, she lost her title as the peace of the universe." I could picture this. Before I did this, I briefly recounted in my mind that when you're angry, you're wrong. So I asked myself, what else could I do? Now, this is an example of what we were just talking about. The more you know, the more choices you have. So here you are, because of what you've heard, that when you're angry, you're wrong, you asked yourself what you could do differently. You couldn't have even asked that question before. You would have just blamed her. It was kind of late at night to be making a phone call to somebody in real love, and besides, we were in the house together and I didn't want her to hear me. I get it. I couldn't get myself into my car to drive around the block. I felt like it was essential to be there and work it out with her somehow. The alternative to getting mad in my mind was condoning what was happening. So, in other words, you were reasoning that it was better to be angry than to condone her wrong behavior, right? Ridiculous. Anger's never the better way. You continue. So I decided it was urgent for this to be brought to her attention. I have had these thoughts many times. As soon as you think that somebody else really needs to learn something, you're about to fall into a tar pit. You continue, and the anger pathway was staring me in the face, so immediate, so effective from my point of view at the time, in the sense that I would be using anger to make a point with her so she'd listen. And I know this path well. I also caught hold of something else that was going on, and this is why I'm writing to you. So we've been having fun so far, but now she's getting to watch her real question. The thing was, I felt a tremendous sense of loneliness at the thought of not getting mad at her because I would be losing a friend. I got to admit, I didn't understand that sentence. So I wrote and asked her. She explained that what she meant is that if she didn't engage her friend with anger, she had already tried engaging her not with anger, that didn't work. So if she didn't use anger, she'd feel like that she would have no way to engage her friend at all. So then she'd be all alone. I had a fear, she said, that I wouldn't be trying to work things out. I felt the loneliness and pain of losing a friendship. So in my mind, expressing myself was essential, and I didn't know how to express myself without the anger. Feeling left out means being alone, and alone means being unloved, and anger was at least engaging. Sounds very clever, doesn't it? Well, I had to get angry because I had to get her attention, and I couldn't just disengage, so I got angry. No. Anger's never the best way to engage. But when we feel lost and alone, anything seems better than feeling lost and alone, including anger. You continue. So maybe I could say that as a child, I was left alone a lot with a father who didn't engage with me except to tell me what to do, and a mother who was largely absent. She worked nights and was never there and never talked to me, and a younger sister and a couple of older brothers, no contact there, and that maybe I was deeply triggered by being left alone again, being left out again, and not being loved again. And yes, all of that would be more than enough to trigger you, and more than enough for you to use to justify being angry at your roommate so you could at least have a conversation and not be completely alone. And finally you conclude, and I strongly rejected a recurrence of that scenario. In other words, I didn't want to be alone again. And anger seemed like the only way. Listen, everybody who's listening, listen to this. We only get angry because that seems like the only thing that will work. Parents say, I have to get angry at my children because they only listen then. Spouses say, I have to get angry because otherwise she just ignores me. We use every excuse we can think of, anger being one of them, because it feels better than being completely alone. Anger becomes a way to relate to somebody. Temporarily, we will feel less alone when we're angry, but it's so damaging. So it's never justifiable. The only way that we can figure this out is to practice and to trust. The first time you stop your anger, that you make a choice, I choose not to be angry this time, you'll discover an amazing thing, a miraculous thing, that you can. That you can choose not to be angry. I can still remember the first time I chose not to be angry. It was a long time ago. I chose not to be, and afterward thought, it's a miracle. If I'd gotten angry, that conversation would have gone straight to hell. But I didn't do it. We can all learn to do that. No joke. Sylvie's story. Sylvie told her mother that she didn't want to go to school, and her mother said, why? And Sylvie said, I'm tired at recess. My legs are tired. And her mother said, why are they tired? She said, because the boys chase me. Now, why do boys chase girls at recess? Because we're really bored and stupid and we don't have anything else to do. She said, her mother said to Sylvie, well, go and tell them that you don't like it and stop running away from them. So she didn't. She simply chose not to run away, like choosing not to react with fear to bullies in relationships with adults, in marriages, in the workplace. Sylvie chose not to be forced to run. And after the first day of school, after her mother told her that, her legs weren't tired anymore. Pretty good teaching from a mother to a daughter. Here's somebody who says, I woke up early this morning thinking about my family when I was a child. I was remembering when my brother Billy used to bully me every day. It's especially bad to be bullied by Billy. The alliteration alone would kill you. She says, my parents didn't know what to do about it, so they would take away part of Billy's allowance every time he hit me, but that didn't work. He just hit me again and again, and every week he didn't get any allowance at all. He used power and control from a young age to deal with his pain, and he still is. What does that say about our parents and our family? He must have felt really scared and alone, and almost certainly he still does. You've lived in fear all your life. I know her. You've been alone, but now you're not. She continues, I was so miserable I started smoking pot by age 11 and drinking my parents' wine. I was a drunk and a pot addict by the time I was 11 and a half. I was all alone, didn't understand why I felt so miserable and scared. and nobody helped me to understand the world. Do you get this? What we do to our kids just with inattention? There was nobody there to help me understand the world. When people come here for interventions, I hear this almost every time somebody comes, from 50 and 60-year-old people with tears running down their face. Nobody has ever taught me what the world can be like, or what it is like, or what I can do in it. She continues, I thought I must be worthless. Since nobody seemed to care, that's what I thought. I felt really alone. It was horrible. Even though my parents were nice people, they were horrible parents. They left me alone all the time and told me I was difficult with the way that they treated me, with the words they used with me. They would send me downstairs to my room to be alone when I did something wrong. Alone all the time. I was clueless. I needed somebody to love me. I needed somebody to teach me what the world is like. I was trusting and tender as a little girl, but nobody was reliable or available for me. And I blamed all of it on myself. This is a summary of the whole PCSD book right here. It's a living hell. She's screaming for somebody to love her, screaming for somebody to make her life not alone. Nothing. She continues, I keep crying this morning, remembering childhood events and how I felt. Most of this I'd totally stuffed down and forgotten. I could never understand any of it. I couldn't understand my life. I thought my anger and fear just meant that I was a bad kid who wasn't lovable. Well, what else could you conclude? But now you know the truth. And you have the love you've always wanted. And you have it all the time. She finishes. I wish I could spend all day being loved when I feel sad, like I did while I was there with you. And you can. And we all can. We all can do this. We can all find real love. We can all learn to trust it. We can remember it and carry it around with us so we feel held all day long, no matter how awful things get. And then we can learn to share it and help other people in the way that we wished we had been helped. And then we're in the flow. Then we feel it all the time. Then we feel infinitely powerful. It's a promise. We can do it. See you in a week.